marvelous long reads.
The world of Game of Thrones isn't just limited to the story of the Starks or the return of the dragons. George R.R. Martin has strived to create a lush universe with exceptional lore and an ever-expanding history. From this universe, we bring you the story of the first volume of The Hedge Knight, set roughly 90 years before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. This is a story of two squires trying to find their way in a world where betrayal and absolute authority reign, and every transgression leads to horrific consequences. One wrong move and you could end up trading lives that never belonged to you in the first place. So let's dive in and learn what it means to be a Hedge Knight in the Kingdom of Westeros. The Hedge Knight, issue number 1, the Barony of Squires. Death comes for all. It comes for the rich, it comes for the poor, for the nobility and the peasants, for the kings, and for the barbarians. But rarely do you get to choose your demise. All this and more runs through this large young man's mind as he digs a grave for his mentor with a wooden shovel while the gods pour rain on this land to soften it in an attempt to help him. This is Dunk, and the limp, lifeless body under the tree beside him once belonged to his mentor, Sir Arlen of Pennytree. Dunk continues to dig the grave, and once the job is done, he grabs Sir Arlen's body and gently lays it down in the ground. As he does so, Dunk reflects on Sir Arlen's life. He had a good one, no one could deny that. He lived to be close to 60. Not many men in these times live long enough to see so many years pass, but Dunk's heart still aches, for he had expected his valiant mentor to have had a better death. He was a Hedge Knight, after all, and Dunk was his squire. They rode from keep to keep, took service with different lords, and they fought their battles, ate in their halls, and when the war was done, they moved on. He participated in tourneys from time to time, and he had found his glory years ago when he faced the Prince of Dragonstone at Storm's End. They rode against each other again and again, 7 times. They broke lances on each other's shields. Although Sir Arlen lost that day, he deemed it a victory. He would always say, it's not every man who can boast that he broke 7 lances against the finest knight in the 7 kingdoms. And that bit Dunk believed in, which is why he had thought that Sir Arlen would die on a battlefield and not on the side of a muddy road. But that's how life is, and Sir Arlen knew it. For the past few years, he had been counting every sunset and wondering what adventure each succeeding morrow would bring. Well, one morrow brought the rains, the next one brought wet, gusty winds, and the third brought the winter chill. By the 4th day, Sir Arlen was too weak to ride, and today he is gone. Dunk apologizes to Sir Arlen for not burying him with his sword because it would serve him better, and then wishes that he had not passed away at all. He then offers a few good words for his dead mentor, thanking him for all that he has taught him, and then finally covers the grave. As the sun rises on the horizon, the consequences of Sir Arlen's death begin to loom over Dunk. He has been left with his possessions, his armor, his 3 horses, and all of his money. If Dunk sold Thunder, Old Chestnut, and their saddles and bridles, he would have enough money to make a new life. But then, the sight of Sir Arlen's shield steadies his mind, and Dunk decides that he will continue the life of a Hedge Knight. That's all he knows, after all. But then again, what should he do? Should he find another Hedge Knight and become his squire? Or should he go to a city like Lannisport or King's Landing to join the city guard? As these questions run through Dunk's mind, a robin watches over him as he unsheathes Sir Arlen's sword and holds it up in the air. It fits his grip perfectly, and there's a tourney in Ashford Meadow in a couple of days. Dunk decides to take his chances, and so, by nightfall, he's stopping at the inn on the outskirts of Ashford. Sir Arlen had left him enough money to enjoy a hearty meal and enough ale to drown his sorrows. Even though he knows he can rent a room at the inn after his meal, Dunk decides to be smart with his finances and decides that he would be better off sleeping on the ground instead. This is when he notices a bald kid emerging from the creek near him. He assumes this is the stable boy and orders him to rub down his palfrey and feed all 3 horses. The boy is quite cocky. He tells Dunk that he could do the job, but he won't, and this forces Dunk to claim that he's a knight to establish his authority. However, Dunk is quickly let down when the boy points out that most knights don't look like him, and neither do they have a sword belt made of rope. Dunk scoffs and dismisses the boy and simply walks into the inn, while once again ordering him to look after the horses. The inn is completely empty, and the only patron inside seems to have passed out after a lot of wine and a little of the bread. The innkeeper offers Dunk a meal and ale, and he takes her up on it. In fact, he decides to have both the lamb and the duck. As they continue to converse, the woman asks asks if her son is taking care of his horses, and Dunk nods. He then learns that the entire town has left for the tourney in Ashford, and if not for her, her family would have gone as well. The innkeeper, however, does not understand the hoopla around knights. They never do anything for the common folk, and their jousts don't bring down the price of eggs. But Dunk pays no heed to her comments. Instead, he enjoys the ale now that Sir Arlen isn't here to stop him, and boldly proclaims to her that he plans to be the champion of the tourney. The woman smiles, but before she can say something, the passed-out man wakes up and charges at Dunk. He claims to have dreamed about him, and then shouts, "You stay away from me, you hear? You stay well away." Dunk addresses the man as "my lord," for he's clearly nobility, but this is when the innkeeper warns him under her breath that there is no point talking to the man. All he does is drink and talk about his dreams. And that is true, because once the man comes to his senses, he begins to crave wine and the warmth of a woman's legs again. Unfortunately for him, all the horrors have gone to Ashford. Once Dunk has had his meal, he takes a short jaunt around the inn to settle his stomach, and this is when he notices Thunder, his horse, neighing in the stables. He quickly rushes in, fearing the worst, only to find the little boy from earlier dressed in Sir Arlen's armor, pretending to be a knight on top of Thunder. Dunk bursts out laughing, and then jokingly accuses the boy of being a thief. Dunk warns the boy that this little stunt could have cost him his life. After all, Thunder is a warhorse, and he kicks before he sees. But the boy is defiant as usual. He proclaims, "I could ride him as well as you." Dunk reprimands him for the insolence, and then has the boy remove Sir Arlen's chainmail and half-helm. He has the boy clean them, and though the kid does as he's told, he seems to have an ulterior motive. The look in his eyes doesn't match the words coming out of his mouth, and the words don't seem to match the way he carries his body. The boy asks Dunk if he's going to Ashford for the tourney, and when he nods, the kid begs him to take him along. Dunk tells the boy that his mother wouldn't approve of it. However, this is when he learned that he had assumed wrong. The boy does not belong to the innkeeper, and his mother had been dead for a long time. Dunk is still a bit drunk, and though this doesn't make sense to him, he again makes the assumption that the boy might have been apprenticed to the inn. We then learn that the boy is an orphan, just like Dunk, until he was taken in by Sir Arlen. The boy continues to plead his case. He could be Dunk's squire. After all, he looks like he needs one desperately, but this doesn't sit well with Dunk. He's had enough of the boy's insolence. He threatens to hit him and then orders him to pack some oats for his horses so that he can continue his journey. The boy gives him a nasty look but dares not open his mouth again. He does as he's told and packs the oats before hanging them from Thunder's saddle. And during these few minutes, Dunk's heart tries to justify the decision he's just made. He could take the boy with him, but the life of a squire for a hedge knight was a tough one, and he would have a better future here at the inn. Dunk tosses a copper to the boy as he leaves, and he continues to tell himself that taking the boy with him would have been no kindness. But as he rides away, he can feel the boy's gaze staring daggers into his back until he vanishes over the horizon and out of sight. At dawn, Dunk reaches Ashford, and the sight of all the tents from different houses momentarily amazes him. Everyone is here, and Dunk thanks Sir Arlen for teaching him all the sigils of the different houses. Had he not, Dunk would have simply been a lost and illiterate hedge knight. Dunk recognizes various sigils: the nightingales of Lord Caron of the Marches, the crowned stag of Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, the Tarly Huntsman, House Dondarrion's Purple Lightning, the Red Apple sigil of the Fossaways, the Lannisters, the Penroses, the Marbrands, the Hightowers, and even the Freys. It seems like every lordly house of the West and the South has sent a knight or two to participate in this tourney to look over the fair young maid and brave the lists in her honor. Dunk knows he can't make camp here, for he would suffer both silent scorn and open mockery, and so he decides to ride away and camp on the outskirts of the meadow, a good half-mile away from the town and castle, at a place where a bend in the creek had created a deep pool. The first thing Dunk does is wash himself in the creek, and then, as he lets himself dry in the warm spring air under an elm tree, he notices a dragonfly buzzing near him, and this makes him wonder why these creatures are called dragonflies. After all, they look nothing like a dragon, and though Dunk has never seen a dragon, Sir Arlen had, and Dunk remembers forcing the old man to tell him the dragon story over and over again. Sir Arlen was just a little boy when his father took him to King's Landing, and while he was there, he saw the last dragon. He visited a year before its untimely demise. She was a small female, stunted with withered wings. None of her eggs ever hatched, and legend had it that King Aegon had poisoned her, the third Aegon, the one who was colloquially known as Dragonbane. Aegon the Unlucky. He was afraid of dragons, for he had been witness to his own mother's murder at the hands of his uncle's dragon. Sir Arlen would always end this story by saying, "The summers have been shorter since the last dragon died, and the winters longer and crueler." With this, we switch back to the present as Dunk surveys Ashford and walks among the crowd. Dozens of merchants have erected their stalls at the edge of the field, and among them is a pair of puppeteers who have the entire crowd enchanted by the story of a knight who slew a dragon. Dunk watches the play as he eats, but truth be told, he's more focused on the puppeteer than the puppets. Dunk could have tossed the puppeteers a copper, but he knows he needs all the money he has on him because he needs a new set of armor, one that fits him perfectly. And so, he goes to the blacksmith who set up his tent among the merchants, Steely Pate. Pate measures Dunk and then nods. He has armor that would fit Dunk. It's not anything fancy with gold or silver inlays, but it is right for the job. Solid steel that would not instantly buckle. However, the price is a problem. Steely Pate wants 800 stags for the armor, a price Dunk cannot afford. He offers Pate Sir Arlen's old armor and helm in exchange for the new armor, and Pate decides to cut him some slack and reduce 200 stags if the armor is in good condition. Dunk takes the deal. He gives Pate 2 silvers and promises to return on the morrow with the armor and the rest of the coin. As Dunk walks to his camp, he's lost in his own thoughts. Is he man enough to go up against all these knights from all the lordly houses? After all, even Sir Arlen was content after having been defeated by the Prince of Dragonstone, so should Dunk be content too? However, before he can untangle his thoughts, the sight of a fire at his camp shakes him to his core. Someone is stealing his horses. They likely have taken Sir Arlen's armor, and so Dunk rushes to the site armed with his sword and shield, only to realize that his camp has simply been occupied by the boy from the inn. He's lit a campfire and is cooking fish for the two of them. The Hedge Knight, Issue 2, A Robin Amongst Hawks. The confrontation between Dunk and the boy is heated, to say the least. Insolently, the boy tells Dunk that he came here in the back of someone's cart and that he is not going back. When Dunk threatens to take him home, the boy defiantly tells him that in that case, he'd be missing the tournament and a couple of months because his home is back in King's Landing. This catches Dunk off guard, for he too is from Flea Bottom. He cannot bring himself to blame the boy for trying to leave that place, and so he simply changes the topic and asks the boy what he's done with his clothes. The boy tells him that he washed them, groomed the horses, caught the fish he's cooking right now, and even tried to raise Dunk's pavilion, but couldn't find one. Dunk tells him that he cannot afford a pavilion for now, and frankly, the open skies and a sturdy elm tree are all they need. The boy then asks for his name, and Dunk gives it to him, only for the boy and Dunk to realize that Dunk isn't a very knightly name. The boy questions him, asking if Dunk is short for Duncan. Dunk stammers at first, but then proudly proclaims that yes, he is Sir Duncan the Tall. The boy still doubts him, and this is when Dunk gets in his face and demands his name. The boy says that his name is Egg, and Dunk decides to take him on as a squire, at least for the tourney. Egg smiles widely and addresses Dunk as Sir for the first time, and in return, Dunk helps Egg cook the fish properly. The meal isn't half bad, definitely better than the hard salt beef he had planned to have for dinner. Egg falls asleep soon after they're finished, but Dunk stays awake. He thinks about treating the boy just as Sir Arlen had treated him, and his intentions are emboldened by the sky when he spots a shooting star. Dunk imagines and hopes that luck is on his side after that, for all the other knights are busy staring at their silk in their pavilions by now. None of them have eyes on the sky. The next morning, Dunk wakes up early, leaves Egg in charge of the camp, and then rides to Ashford again. His first task is to visit the steward, Plummer, and enter the tourney. Plummer questions his knighthood and demands his name. In return, Dunk tells him that he's Sir Duncan the Tall, and that he served under various lords while he was a squire for Sir Arlen. Sir Arlen passed away because of a chill recently, but he managed to knight Duncan before he left the mortal realm with a robin as their only witness. Dunk holds up Sir Arlen's sword as proof, but Plummer tells him that he'll need proof of his knighthood, which means unless one of the assembled knights can vouch for him, unfortunately, he will not be able to take part in the tourney. Dunk figures he can ask Sir Manfred from House Dondarrion for help. He and Sir Arlen served under his father in Dorne 3 years ago, and this is when Plummer warns him that he needs to be vouched for by tomorrow. Moreover, those that are vanquished in the tourney will forfeit their arms, armor, and horse to the victors. Plummer advises Dunk to have enough money to pay such a ransom in case he loses, but Dunk is still confident that he's going to win the tournament. Dunk then walks out and asks a stable boy to fetch him the Master of Horse, and this is when the entire field is enchanted by the arrival of 3 Kingsguard who are flying the banner of House Targaryen. The Kingsguard are actually here to protect Prince Aerion Targaryen, son of Prince Maekar and grandson of the reigning king Daeron Targaryen II. Aerion mistakes Dunk for a stable boy and orders him to attend to his horses. Dunk politely declines and tells him that he's not a stable boy. This is when Aerion assumes he is a serving man, and Dunk is once again forced to tell him that he's not that either. When Aerion is told that Dunk is a knight too, he makes a snarky remark that knighthood has fallen on sad days and moves on. Dunk clearly doesn't like Aerion, but before he does anything stupid, the Master of Horse distracts him. Dunk tells the Master of Horse that he wants to sell his palfrey, but unfortunately, the man has no use for new horses right now, and he advises him to talk to Henley in town instead. Dunk then decides to chat with the Kingsguard and is relieved to learn that they don't plan on participating in the tourney. Instead, they're here to protect the princes because Prince Valar is here too, and he's one of Lady Ashford's champions. The thought of facing either of the princes in battle unnerves Dunk, but he continues on his way to town to sell his palfrey. Dunk's heart aches at the thought of selling a horse he's cared for so many years, but he also remembers Sir Arlen's lesson. A knight should never love a horse, since more than a few were likely to die under him. Henley and Dunk negotiate back and forth a couple of times until the price of 750 silvers is decided upon for the palfrey. Dunk lets go of the horse, Sweetfoot, after handing over a couple of coppers so that she'll be well fed tonight. After all, she served Sir Arlen for years and helped him traverse thousands of miles. She deserved it. Dunk then goes back to the field where the merchants have set up their tents, and once again he's enchanted by the beautiful puppeteer and her display. This time, the puppet show is telling the story of Sir Rillian and how he luckily managed to defeat a dragon. He finally talks to the woman, introduces himself, appreciates her talent, and even tosses her a copper for last night. He then tries to invite her for a drink or a meal, but she politely declines him by telling him that she has another show after this. But Dunk is clearly smitten. The girl is tall, just like him, and for once in his life, he wouldn't have to bend down to kiss someone. He then finds two knights from House Fossaway jousting in the field. This is Sir Steffon Fossaway and his cousin and squire, Raymond Fossaway. Steffon is clearly skilled, for Raymond cannot match his prowess, but his cousin has a good heart, for he refuses to yield when he clearly should. In retaliation, Steffon knocks him on the head with his shield and then invites Duncan for a practice round. Dunk politely declines the offer, and though Steffon is sarcastic and pompous, he is not unkind to Dunk. Steffon moves on and spars with Sir Grants instead, and this is when Raymond catches up to Dunk and apologizes to him. Raymond had tried to get Dunk to spar with Steffon, but now he realizes the error of his ways. Dunk has no armor, and Steffon would have used that against him. After all, Steffon does have a reputation for injuring knights before a tourney so that he can get the upper hand. Dunk shakes Raymond's hand, and the two part ways, having found a new friend in each other. Dunk then collects his armor and helm from Pate, who, true to his word, gives Dunk some quality armor for his silver. Dunk shows off his new armor and helm to Egg back at the camp, and the boy coyly teases him that he still doesn't have a pavilion. Dunk, however, ignores him and tells Egg that on the morrow he will be accompanying him into Ashford. Dunk will first speak to Sir Manfred. After that, he will check out the tourney grounds, then buy some food for them and the horses. The next day, we see Dunk pleading his case with Sir Manfred. He reminds Manfred that he and Sir Arlen accompanied his father into battle against the Vulture King in the Red Mountains, but Manfred tells him that he doesn't remember Sir Arlen or him. After all, his father charged into battle with 800 knights. How could he be expected to remember each of them? Dunk is clearly distraught. His chances of taking part in the tourney hang in the balance, and he needs to prove that he really is a knight. And suddenly, he remembers the night Sir Manfred's father told the tale of how their house got their sigil, how on a stormy night, one of his messengers was attacked by two Dornishmen. They killed his horse, the messenger broke his sword, the end was nigh. But then suddenly, bright purple lightning struck the two men and killed them. The message carried by the messenger gave the Storm King victory over the Dornishmen, and as thanks, the messenger was made a lord, and thus the messenger took the purple lightning as the sigil of his house. However, this is when an annoyed Sir Manfred interrupts him and tells him that every man or woman who has served under his father has heard some form of that story. Knowing it doesn't make Dunk a knight. Manfred then puts his foot down, refusing to give Dunk any more of his time, and then dismisses him out of his pavilion disrespectfully. The Hedge Knight, Issue 3, Dealings with Dragons. Disappointed and thwarted by the failure he was just bestowed, a defeated Dunk returns to Ashford Castle and contemplates what he's going to tell Plummer, the steward of Lord Ashford. After all, without someone to vouch for him, his chances of taking part in the tourney are as good as dead. He knocks on Plummer's door, only to learn that he's not in his office. The man standing guard tells him that he's in the Great Hall, and Dunk decides to head there after an awkward exchange with the guard. Unfortunately for Dunk, the Great Hall is brimming with life, and at the center of it all is the Targaryen Targaryen bloodline, namely Prince Maekar and Prince Baelor. Turns out, Prince Maekar's sons, Daeron and Aegon, have gone missing, and though the Kingsguard are doing their best to find them, Prince Baelor uses this opportunity to chide his brother for forcing his son, Daeron, to take part in the tourney. Baelor points out how Daeron is known to do such things, to go missing when he's needed. He belongs on a tourney field no more than Aerys or Rhaegal does. By this, Prince Baelor means that Daeron would sooner ride a whore than a horse, and though he is right, Prince Maekar doesn't like this, for he doesn't need to be reminded of his son's failings over and over again. This heated conversation is more than enough to tell Dunk that he's at the wrong place at the wrong time. He quietly tries to leave, however, this is when he's spotted by an angry Maekar who demands the reason for this intrusion. However, this is when Prince Baelor steps in and reins in his brother by reminding him that this is the knight whom their steward was expecting today. Dunk tells everyone that Sir Manfred has refused to vouch for him despite him having every proof of having been knighted by Sir Arlen, and though Lord Ashford tries to remind him that the sword and shield aren't proof enough, Sir Arlen's sigil of the winged chalice on his shield is recognized by Prince Baelor. He remembers Sir Arlen, and though he never won a tourney that Baelor knows of, he did fight valiantly. He remembers Sir Arlen overthrowing Lord Stokeworth and the bastard of Harrenhal 16 years ago. He also remembers the time when he managed to unhorse the Grey Lion himself. Baelor demands to know if Dunk remembers the true name of the Grey Lion, and Dunk meekly tells him that it was Sir Daemon Lannister himself. Everyone can't believe Prince Baelor remembers a random Hedge Knight. However, this is when Baelor corrects them and tells them that on that same day, Sir Arlen was his opponent for the first tilt. They broke 4 lances before the battle was over. This is when an excited Dunk corrects him and tells him that it was 7 lances, and this is when all eyes turn to him. Everyone begins to snicker and laugh, and Sir Arlen's following words come back to haunt Dunk again. Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall. Prince Baelor, however, is still smiling, and Dunk instantly falls to his knees and begs his mercy. Baelor simply smiles and tells him that no harm was done, and also reminds him that tales tend to grow over the years, but the 2 of them only broke 4 lances. Baelor then vouches for Dunk, which gives him permission to enter the tourney. However, when that is done, Maekar abruptly dismisses him, and his intention is clear. He wants Dunk gone from the Great Hall as soon as possible. However, as he's leaving, Prince Baelor calls out to him over the crowd and reminds him that because he's not of Arlen's blood, he cannot use arms that bear his sigils, which means he will need a sigil of his own. Dunk respectfully bows and assures him that he will get that done immediately. He thanks Baelor for all that he's done and then vows to fight bravely in the tourney. Dunk catches up with Egg outside, who's busy watching the puppet show. When the show is over, Dunk and Egg go to talk to the beautiful woman whom Dunk had been crushing on, and Egg starts the conversation by commending her puppeteering skills as well as her immaculate puppets. This is when Dunk enters the conversation and requests the woman paint him a new sigil. However, he sheepishly tells her that he doesn't know what he wants painted, which may lead her to believe that he's a fool. This is when the woman smiles and tells him that all men are fools and all men are knights. They then brainstorm, and with the help of Egg, they decide to paint the field in the colors of a sunset because Sir Arlen loved them, and the device at the front will be an elm tree while a shooting star can be seen in the sky. With that decided, the woman tells Dunk that he can have his shield tomorrow. This is when they exchange names, Duncan the Tall and Tansel the Too Tall, because that is what boys have called her all her life. The tension is palpable, but ultimately they part ways because the tourney is about to begin. Dunk will not be participating on the first day. That honor is reserved for the higher borns, but he can learn a lot today. As he leads Egg towards the front of the field, he tells the boy more about the tournament. Lord Ashford is holding this tourney to celebrate his daughter's 13th name day, which means that 5 champions have been appointed to defend her honor. All other participants are challengers, and any challenger that manages to defeat a champion gets to take their place. Egg, however, is unimpressed. He seems to know more about knights and tourneys than Dunk, which he demonstrates by telling him everything about the tourney. He tells Dunk that the 5 champions at the end will get to decide the fair maid's fate, whether she retains the crown of love and beauty or if another takes her place. When the crowd has gathered, Egg is unable to see anything, and so Dunk lifts him up and places him on his shoulders. They start talking about all who are present, and through their conversation we learn a few facts, namely that Prince Baelor doesn't look like a Targaryen with his dark hair, and that's because he favors his mother, who was a Dornish princess. They also spot Leo Tyrell, Lord of Highgarden, as well as Prince Valar, Prince Baelor's son. For a few hours, Egg goes on and on about every knight he spots in the stands until the horns finally blow and the tournament begins. The process is simple. Each challenger has his name called out, upon which they approach the stands, bow to Lord Ashford, Prince Baelor, and the Fair Maid, and then choose their opponent by tapping on the shield of one of the champions. The entire meadow grows still as the knights take their positions, and with a loud roar of the horn, they all charge at each other. With a loud crash, all 10 lances are broken on impact, and this is an omen to many that the tournament is going to be successful. Indeed, it turns out to be a splendid day of jousting, one that both the commoners and the lords enjoy. Sir Humphrey Harding and Sir Humphrey Beesbury break no more than a dozen lances. Soon, this is named the Epic Battle of the Humphreys by the small folk. In another joust, a one-eyed Sir Robin Risling loses his helm to Lord Leo's lance, yet he refuses to give up. 3 more times they ride at each other, which is much more impressive if you know that Sir Robin lost his eye to a wooden splinter 5 years ago. As the day goes on, with Egg's help, Dunk soon figures out that Prince Valar is only being challenged by weak knights, and they all yield immediately. Everyone applauds Valar from the stands, but Egg is quite vocal about his disdain for the man. Dunk has to rein him in over and over again. Then there's another man that nobody can miss, Sir Lionel Baratheon. With a helm that sports the antlers of his sigil, Sir Lionel defeats many men, and he defeats them all while breaking into booming laughter. And if his challengers wear any sort of crest on their helm, Sir Lionel makes sure to get off his horse and then slice off the crest and fling it into the crowd. Before long, Sir Lionel is only being challenged by crestless knights. But as for the best displays on the first day, that honor goes to Sir Humphrey Harding, who humbles 14 knights, each of whom is more formidable than the last. Meanwhile, Prince Valar has 9 victories to his name, all against a more undistinguished knight than the previous. Late in the day, to a brazen fanfare of the small folk, a new challenger is announced to the lists, and it's none other than Prince Aerion, son of Prince Maekar. For a moment, Aerion scares Valar by going towards his shield, but then he reveals his decision at the last moment and decides to joust against Sir Humphrey Harding instead. The battle begins, and for some reason, Egg is too invested in this joust. He begins to scream, "Kill him!" over and over again, but whom he wants to see dead remains a mystery. And that's not the only peculiarity of this joust. Dunk notices that Aerion's lance is too low, and by the time he realizes that he plans on murdering Sir Humphrey's horse, it's already too late, and the lance has pierced the horse's neck. The cheers of the crowd are replaced by shouting and screaming. Above everything else, however, are the screams of a dying horse. Screams that are too close to being human. Egg, clearly traumatized by the event, simply gets down from Dunk's shoulders and begins to walk away. Dunk tries to help him by telling him that it was simply a mistake, but for some reason, Egg is convinced that Prince Aerion did it on purpose. Talking ill of lords and princes never bodes well for the small folk, and so Dunk quickly shuts him down by reiterating that it was a mistake and then leads him away. The Hedge Knight, Issue 4, The Vow of a Knight. By the time the chaos of the meadow is set right, the sun is already setting, and so Lord Ashford calls a halt to the day's jousting. Dunk buys himself and Egg some ale, and his narration tells us that he is hoping this will cheer up the young boy. The horse's death weighs on him heavily, and so Dunk walks around trying to cheer him up, but when nothing works, he decides to take Egg to the only place he seems to like in Ashford, the puppet show. The puppet show this evening is about Princess Nymeria of Nysar. Dunk and Egg watch the show while Dunk daydreams about Tansel. However, this is when his thoughts are interrupted by Raymond Fossaway, who catches him off guard. He introduces Egg to Raymond, and the ensuing conversation reveals that Sir Humphrey broke his leg when his horse fell, which means that he will no longer be able to take part in the tournament. Not only that, Sir Humphrey is declared the victor by Lord Ashford and is even awarded Prince Aerion's courser. Despite his leg being broken, Prince Baelor decides it would not be seemly to remove Sir Humphrey's shield under any circumstance, which is why the tournament will now continue with just 4 champions. This plunges Dunk into deep thought, because this means Sir Leo Tyrell, Sir Lionel Baratheon, Sir Tybolt Lannister, and Prince Valar are the remaining champions, the first 3 of whom Dunk dares not challenge, but this also means that he would be forced to challenge Prince Valar. However, a Hedge Knight can't just challenge the prince. Valar is the son of Baelor Breakspear and second in line to the Iron Throne. His blood is the blood of Aegon the Conqueror and the Young Dragon, and the blood of Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight. Dunk asks Raymond who Stefan plans on choosing, and this is when Raymond reveals that Stefan is keeping a close eye on all the jousts. If any of the champions is injured, he'll quickly jump in and strike their shield to challenge them. Raymond then invites Dunk for a drink, and Egg tells him that there are 2 more plays left, which means that he can be back before the crowd disperses. Dunk is clearly uncomfortable at the notion of accepting hospitality, but with all of his excuses now exhausted thanks to Egg, he has no choice but to take Raymond up on his offer. As the two men talk in the Fossaway Pavilion, we learn that Aerion is understandably angry at Lord Ashford for giving his courser away, but that was likely a suggestion given by his uncle, Prince Baelor. It's also no secret that Aerion is a bit of a piece of work, and everybody is grateful that he's quite low in the order of succession. We also learn that Prince Maekar has now gone out on his own alongside Roland Crakehall of the Kingsguard. One of Maekar's missing sons is Daeron the Drunk, his heir. He went missing alongside his youngest brother. They left Summerhall together but never reached Ashford. This is when Raymond pities Maekar, and when Dunk questions him about it, Raymond says Maekar is the king's fourth son, not quite as bold as Prince Baelor, nor as clever as Prince Aerys, nor as gentle as Prince Rhaegal, and now he must suffer seeing his own sons overshadowed by his brothers. Daeron is a sot, Aerion is vain, the third one was so uncompromising that they gave him to the Citadel to make him a maester. As for the youngest, but he's cut off before he can say more, as Egg bursts into the pavilion and screams, "Sir Duncan, Aerion, he's hurting her. Aerion is hurting Tansel," and without a second thought, Dunk rushes out and sprints to the puppet show. There, he watches in horror as Aerion's soldiers break and throw all the puppets while he ruthlessly starts breaking Tansel's fingers. They set the puppet show on fire, and a dismayed Dunk watches as Aerion throws Tansel to the ground after breaking her drawing fingers. Without another thought, Dunk steps into the fray, throws away the soldier standing in his way, and then punches Prince Aerion right across the face. Aerion pulls out a dagger, but Dunk steps on his hand and then kicks him in the face. This is when the soldiers step in, and though Dunk is able to knock a few of them away, he is ultimately subdued and held to the ground by them once they pounce on him. Aerion gets up and approaches Dunk while calmly proclaiming that he dislodged one of his teeth. He then recognizes Dunk as the man who refused to be his stable boy, and upon realizing that he has feelings for Tansel, he kicks her in the chest once again. Dunk holds his tongue. After all, Aerion is a prince, and if he wants to kill Dunk, he can do so without any consequences. Annoyed that Dunk will not speak anymore, Aerion orders his soldiers to break all his teeth using a hammer. However, this is when Egg rushes in and screams at everyone to stop. Dunk tries to shoo him away, but this is when Egg reveals that he's not just an ordinary orphan, or if they harm him or Dunk, they'll have to answer to his father and uncle. Behind Egg stands the entire force of the Fossaways. Egg then addresses the soldiers, restraining Dunk by name, and orders them to let him go. They do as they're told, and this is when we learn that Egg is a Targaryen, and that Aerion is his brother. When Aerion questions him about his hair, Egg defiantly tells him that he cut it off himself, and that's because he didn't want to look like him. The second day of the tourney was going to be a pleasant one, at least Dunk had hoped so. There would have been fewer small folk, and he and Egg would have been able to find seats, but instead, he's now trapped in a cell, and Egg is forced to watch the tourney from the viewing box. Dunk doesn't have a view of the field from his cell. All his possessions have been taken, and all he can do is hope that Egg and Raymond will tend to Thunder and Chestnut. But then, Dunk begins to loathe himself again. How could he have been so stupid as to assume Egg was from Flea Bottom? Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall and slow as an oryx. Then, his concern for Tansel takes over, and he winces every time he hears a lance break in the field, for that sound reminds him of Aerion breaking her fingers. But then, his concern is overshadowed by a memory of Sir Arlen, the one in which a young Dunk questions him why he fights as a Hedge Knight when the glory of each battle would go to the Lord's men. And this is when Sir Arlen taught him the true meaning of being a Hedge Knight. He had said, "Yes, the glory goes to the Lord's Knight, but if you think that matters, you're thicker than I thought. Have you learned nothing from me? A Hedge Knight is the truest kind of knight, Dunk. Other knights serve lords who keep them, or from whom they hold their lands, but we serve where we will, for men whose causes we believe in. Every knight swears to protect the weak and innocent, but we keep that vow the best." That memory, those words, echo in Dunk's mind until night comes, and then the door to his cell is finally opened. Egg walks in with food and light and then orders the soldiers accompanying him to leave them alone. Egg then reveals that his uncle Baelor has urged him to beg Dunk's forgiveness for deceiving him, and Dunk seems to agree with Prince Baelor. He's angry at Egg for having lied to him about everything. He starts by asking the boy's name, and we learn that his true name is Aegon, like Aegon the Dragon. 4 Aegons have been king in the past. Dunk then asks the question that's been eating at him. Why did Aegon lie to him? Was it just to make a fool of him? To prove how thick he is? But this is when Aegon interrupts him and, with tears in his eyes, tells him that he was destined to squire for Daeron, his oldest brother. But Daeron never wanted to take part in the tourney, which is why they fled their escort. Daeron was the one who shaved Aegon's head so no one would recognize him. He, on the other hand, had common hair, which is why he could keep it. But Aegon wasn't going to let his dream end that way. He wanted to squire for a night, and so he found Dunk. Dunk, however, is still pretty angry with Egg, but the boy manages to pacify him. They may not be alike, but they are both from King's Landing, and Dunk may not like to hear it right now, but Egg likes him, and he can keep calling him Egg unless they're in court. Dunk demands to know what's going to become of him, and this is when Egg tells him that Prince Baelor has summoned him once he's finished his meal. Dunk leaves the half-eaten bread behind and quickly gets up because it's hard to have an appetite when your fate is hanging in the balance. Aegon leads him to Lord Ashford's chambers, which are currently the abode of Prince Baelor. This is where Dunk bows to the prince and demands to know his fate. Prince Baelor is quite passive-aggressive with Egg when he asks him to pour them some wine. It's clear he doesn't appreciate Egg deceiving an honorable knight, but Dunk politely steps in and reassures Prince Baelor that, regardless of the treachery, Aegon has been an exceptional squire. Nonetheless, Baelor continues to berate Aegon for his actions have jeopardized Dunk's life. Aegon should have come to him in the castle when he saw what Aerion was doing. Granted, Baelor too would have beaten Aerion to a pulp for his actions, but he would have lived and faced no consequences because he's a prince. This is when Aegon defiantly tells his uncle that he hates Aerion and that the castle was too far, which is why he went to Sir Duncan. Angered by Aegon's attitude, but knowing that the boy is basically right, Baelor simply dismisses him so that he can speak to Sir Duncan alone. Aegon gracefully bows and takes his leave, and this is when Baelor confronts Duncan and bluntly asks him, "How good of a knight are you truly? How skilled at arms?" Dunk tells Baelor all that Sir Arlen taught him, and this is when the heir to the Iron Throne reveals that his brother, Prince Maekar, has chosen Sir Duncan as the target of his wrath. He had hoped his sons, Aerion and Daeron, would outshine Baelor's in this tournament, but they both have shamed him. Daeron was found drunk in an inn, while Aerion ended up disgracing himself, first by killing Sir Humphrey's horse, and then by breaking Tancel's fingers. Things are worse because Aerion has already filled his father's ears. He has framed the puppeteers as traitors and accused them of high treason because the dragon is a sigil of the royal house. Depicting one being slain in battle, according to Aerion, was a veiled attack on House Targaryen. Additionally, Daeron's excuse after having been discovered has not helped Dunk's case either, because he told his father that a big robber knight kidnapped Aegon and that he had spent the past few days trying to recover him. Unfortunately, Sir Duncan has been cast as this robber knight. Dunk stammers and tells Baelor that Aegon will vouch for the truth, but unfortunately, he too is Maekar's son, the youngest one, and one who is known to lie, which is why Maekar will not believe him over the testaments of his older sons. Either way, regardless of whom Maekar believes, one thing is for certain. Sir Duncan laid hands upon the blood of the dragon, and for that transgression, he must be punished. Baelor then gets up from his chair and says, Aerion would like your head, with or without your teeth. He will not have it. That I can promise you. But I cannot deny him a trial. My brother and I must sit in judgment of you, along with Lord Ashford and Lord Tyrell of Highgarden. Unfortunately, Dunk, your right hand and right leg are at stake, because the last time a man was found guilty of striking royal blood, the offending hand was cut off. Dunk is clearly taken aback by this revelation, and in return, Baelor puts his hand on Sir Duncan's shoulder and says, "To be sure, I will urge my fellow judges to be merciful. I am the king's hand and the heir to the Iron Throne. My word carries some weight, but so does my brother's. The risk is there." Dunk stammers. He wants to say a lot, but his words desert him. He wants to plead Tancel's case. They never meant treason, it was just a wooden dragon. It was never meant to represent the Targaryens or the prince, but Dunk cannot bring himself to say either of these things. And this is when Prince Baelor reveals the reason for his first question. When he asked Dunk how skilled he was in combat, it was because as a knight accused of a crime, he has the right to demand trial by combat, and Baelor seems to be heavily suggesting that Sir Duncan do so when he gets the chance. The Hedge Knight, Issue 5, The Will of Breakspear. Dunk had planned a lot for his hearing the next day. He had replayed scenarios in his mind and had prepared for the perfect opportunity to challenge Aerion to trial by combat if the need should arise, but unfortunately, all his preparations and planning were rendered useless when Prince Aerion himself demanded a trial by 7, which he could do as his right. Neither of those here to judge Dunk were impressed by this. Prince Baelor drummed his fingers on the table while Lord Ashford and Lord Tyrell of Highgarden waited silently for Maekar to speak to his son. When Prince Maekar did speak, he asked his son if he was too big of a coward to face the Hedge Knight on his own. However, this is where Aerion used Daeron to his advantage and spun another web of lies. He told everyone present that Daeron too had been wronged by Sir Duncan. After all, he was the one who stole Aegon from him, which meant that before Aerion, he had the right to draw Sir Duncan's blood, and so, through a trial by 7, they both would get to fight Dunk. Daeron vocalizes his disdain over being included in this trial, but he knows his brother. His webs are strong, and Aerion is not someone he wants to make an enemy out of, at least for now. Duncan politely asks the 4 judges what they're talking about, and this is when Prince Baelor steps in and tells Dunk that trial by 7 is an ancient, seldom invoked form of trial by combat. It came across the Narrow Sea along with the Andals and their 7 gods. The Andals believed that if 7 champions fought on each side, the gods, thus being honored, were more likely to take hand and see to it that a just result was achieved. This leaves Dunk perplexed because for a moment he thinks he'll be forced to fight 7 men. However, this is when Prince Maekar says, "Do not play the fool, knight. It will not serve. You must find 6 other knights to fight beside you." And he doesn't know it, but this poses another great hurdle for Sir Duncan. And what happens if no one agrees to join his cause? An angry Maekar then points at Sir Duncan and says, "If a cause is just, good men will fight for it. If you can find no champion, sir, it will be because you are guilty." Could anything be more clear? A dejected Dunk simply lowers his head and walks out of the castle. How was he supposed to find and recruit 6 knights? Why would men join his cause when he had nothing to offer them in return? Were the Targaryens hoping he would flee and make an outlaw knight of himself? Half the night was already gone, and he was supposed to come to the field with 7 knights at dawn. What was he going to do? Dunk ultimately decides that he would rather die a knight than live as a disgraced one, and that's when he's distracted by the neighing of Thunder, his horse. When he rushes to it, he finds both Thunder and Chestnut tied outside the Fossaway Pavilion. Dunk enters the pavilion and tells Raymond and Sir Stefan of all that has transpired and how a trial by 7 will be held at dawn. Raymond is quite concerned for Dunk, and this is when Sir Stefan offers to join the fight on Dunk's behalf. It's clear that he's doing it for the glory more than his loyalty to Dunk, because a trial by 7 hasn't been held in decades, but Dunk is thankful, for he'll take any help he can get right now. Upon learning that Dunk doesn't know any other knights, Stefan decides to reach out to his friends and see if he can convince them to join Dunk's cause. Stefan reassures Dunk that he'll meet him at dawn with all the knights he can convince. Once he's gone, Raymond tells Dunk the truth. He tells Dunk that Stefan is doing this for the glory. He knows other knights surely, but Raymond doubts if any of them truly know him. This is when Egg and Daeron enter the pavilion, and Dunk is understandably livid at the sight of Egg's older brother. He pulls out a knife and threatens the prince, who in retaliation calmly tells Sir Duncan that he has every right to do so, but he's not here to fight. He demands a glass of wine and then takes a seat and confesses to Dunk that he had not even noticed that Aegon was missing until his father found him. What's more, Prince Maekar has decided to fight on Aerion's side because according to him, that is the only way to redeem Daeron and Aerion's honor. Not that Daeron particularly cares for his honor. If it were up to him, he would give it up and distribute it among the peasantry the first chance he got. But jokes aren't the reason he's here. He's here to tell Dunk that he'll throw the fight the first chance he gets. Daeron doesn't like fighting, so after he's struck the first time, he plans on lying still in the mud until the battle is over. He also tells Dunk that his father has commanded the Kingsguard to fight on Aerion's side, which already arms Aerion with 5 knights, 3 Kingsguard, Prince Maekar, and Daeron. Dunk asks who the 7th knight is going to be, and Daeron shakes his head because he doesn't know, but Dunk can rest assured that Aerion will find one, and if he cannot, he'll buy a champion, for he has no lack of gold. Upon learning that Dunk only has Sir Stefan on his side, Egg decides that he will help Dunk, for he knows many knights in this field. Dunk tries to remind Egg that he's going to fight his brothers, but Egg doesn't care. Daeron is going to throw the fight, so he'll be fine, and as for Aerion, Egg hates him with his entire being. Aerion would threaten to castrate Egg when he was a child so he could move up in the line of succession. He threw Egg's cat in the well a few years ago. If it were up to Egg, Aerion would have died long ago. Daeron confirms what his little brother is saying and then takes his leave before his father finds him missing from his chambers yet again. Dunk decides to go get his shield from Tansel, while Raymond and Egg decide to look for knights on their own. As Daeron and Dunk walk out, Dunk asks Daeron about the dream he had back at the inn, and Daeron tells him that his dreams are always true, and it's also true that he dreamt about Dunk that night. His dreams frighten him, which is why Dunk frightens him. In his dream, Daeron saw Dunk and a dead dragon, a great beast with wings so large they could cover the entirety of Ashford. The beast fell, and its body lay on top of Dunk, yet he lived while the beast passed on. Dunk then asks if he was the one who killed the dragon, dragon in Daeron's dream, and the prince replies, "That I could not say." And this is when Daeron begins to lament his choices. He hates that his lie has framed Dunk as the robber knight. He promises to withdraw his accusation, but it will not work unless Aerion withdraws his, which is why Dunk needs to make sure that Aerion is the one who dies in the trial come tomorrow. The evening continues to weigh Dunk down, for when he reaches the merchant's tents, Tanselles is nowhere to be seen. Dunk, of course, curses himself. Why would she stay here after what she had suffered? However, this is when Steely Pate calls out to him and tells him that Tanselle left his shield with him. Pate is also quite observant, for now that Dunk has all his limbs intact, it means there's going to be a trial tomorrow. Dunk tells him that it's going to be a trial by 7, and Pate leads him to his tent. Dunk asks about Tanselle and learns that her uncle forced them to go back to Dorne, partly because out of sight means being forgotten, and partly because he didn't want Tanselle to witness Dunk's death. Pate then brings out the shield, which he took the liberty of strengthening with a new rim. The old one was cheap steel, brittle and rusted. The new one is twice as thick. Though it will be heavier, it will serve Dunk well. And then he hands the shield over, and this is when Dunk, for the first time, gets to see what Tanselle painted for him. Colors of a beautiful sunset, followed by a strong elm and a shooting star above it. It's perfect, or it would have been a few days ago. Now, Dunk can only see the flaws in his design. What was he thinking? A falling star? Did it mean that he too was going to fall? And then a sunset which heralded the night. A dejected Dunk says out loud, "This shield is all painted up by death." And this is when an offended Pate reminds him that the elm is alive, its leaves are green, summer leaves for sure, and it doesn't matter what's painted on the shield, what matters is how it's used. He then reminds Dunk of an old rhyme that Sir Arlen had taught him early on. "Oak and iron guard me well, or else I am dead and doomed to hell." Dejectedly, Dunk asks Pate how much he owes him for the shield repair, and the cheeky blacksmith only charges him a single copper. Come dawn, the rain stops. The field is prepared for the trial by removing the barriers, and when Dunk shows up, he sees that the small folk have already begun to fill the stands. Then, something unexpected happens. As soon as Dunk steps onto the field, he's swarmed by the common folk. Old men shake his hand, young ones hold it, women kiss him, and then Pate proudly reminds him that he's the champion of the free folk because he's the only knight who remembered his vows. Dunk then carries on and finds Raymond waiting for him along with Thunder and his brother Stefan's horse. Thunder has been clad in armor, and wherever that horse armor came from, Dunk is eternally grateful. Then, the other knights begin to show up. The first are Sir Humphrey Beesbury, Sir Humphrey Harding, and Sir Robin Riesling. Even though Sir Humphrey Harding has a broken leg, he still plans to fight because Aerion owes him a grave debt after their last joust. So long as he's on his horse, Sir Humphrey vows to fight beside Dunk with all of his might. Raymond had managed to convince Sir Humphrey Harding. As for Sir Beesbury, he's brother to Harding by marriage, so naturally, he too wants revenge. As for Sir Robin, Egg managed to convince him, which means they already have 5 knights, and that's when the 6th edition arrives, Sir Lionel Baratheon himself, the most feared champion from the tourney. Dunk assumes that Stefan managed to convince him. However, this is when Sir Lionel reveals that it was Egg who convinced him to join Dunk's cause. After all, Lionel didn't plan on sitting out this trial by 7, not when he was getting a chance to fight the Kingsguard as well as Prince Maekar in the process. Elated, Dunk is sure that they will have the 7th knight by their side when Sir Stefan shows up. However, this is when the crowd erupts into a roar because Aerion and his knights are here, flanked by the Kingsguard. The 3 Kingsguard and Prince Maekar and his sons means that they too only have 6 knights, but before Dunk can worry anymore, his squire, Aegon, tells him that it's time he put on his armor, and so Pate and Aegon begin to dress Dunk. They soon turn him into steel after checking each clasp thrice. This is when Stefan shows up to the battle, only to reveal that he will no longer be fighting by Dunk's side. He is instead Prince Aerion's 7th knight. This is when an angry Raymond shuns his brother. He refuses to be his squire anymore and instead demands Sir Duncan knight him so that he can fight in his brother's stead. Duncan hesitates, but everyone assures him that Raymond is making the right choice. But before Sir Duncan can fulfill the deed, Egg rushes in and tells him that Lord Ashford has summoned him. Sir Lionel instead vows to knight Raymond in Sir Duncan's stead while he goes to meet with Lord Ashford. Upon arriving at the stands, Lord Ashford tells Sir Duncan that if he cannot muster 7 knights, he will be declared guilty, and so Duncan has no choice but to appeal to all the knights in the crowd. Do none of them stand for their vows? Do none of them stand for the small folk? Will none of them join his cause? Sir Duncan tries to rile them up and appeal to them every way he can, can, but when the knights refuse to even look at him, Sir Duncan screams, "Are there no true knights among you?" And this is when a familiar voice greets him, and when he turns around, he finds a knight from House Targaryen clad in black armor standing before him. Everyone in the crowd is shocked. Could it be? Could it be Prince Valar himself? Had the young prince taken pity on Dunk? However, everyone makes the same mistake of assuming that this is Prince Valar. When the warrior lifts his helm, it's revealed that this is Prince Baelor Breakspear Targaryen himself. He has borrowed his son's armor to fight on the side of Sir Duncan. There is sorrow in his eyes, for he is about to fight 3 of his family members and 3 of his father's Kingsguard. The Hedge Knight, Issue 6, Trial by 7. Naturally, Baelor joining Dunk's side was going to have consequences, and they come in the form of the accusers being thrown into disarray, especially Prince Maekar, who's livid at the thought of his own brother fighting against him. But Baelor uses this opportunity to remind Maekar that, in his opinion, Sir Duncan the Tall did not attack his son. He instead protected the weak and upheld his knight's vows, which is why he's going to let the gods decide who is right and who is wrong. Dunk's party then convenes, and Raymond reveals that he has changed the sigil of the apple on his shield and painted it green. He says, "I fear I may not be ripe, as my brother usually says, but better green than wormy, eh?" Everyone smiles wide at this proclamation, and even Prince Baelor seems to approve of the decision. However, their laughter doesn't last long, as the next second, Lord Ashford's Septon appears on the field and begins calling out to the gods for justice through this trial. Prince Baelor knows they're short on time, and so he gathers all the knights around him and explains to them his strategy. The accusers are going to be armed with heavy war lances made from ash 8 feet long and fitted with steel tips sharp enough to pierce their shields. For this reason, they're actually going to use tourney lances. Although tourney lances are designed to splinter, they're also 12 feet long, which will allow them to keep their attackers at bay for the first tilt. The idea is to unhorse your opponent without taking a blow, which will give them a huge advantage on the battlefield. There are only a few ways for this trial to end. It ends when either the accusers or Sir Duncan fall, or when the accusers yield and withdraw their accusations. If neither event happens, then the battle will go on until all 7 from one side are dead. Apart from that, they have to worry about the Kingsguard. Thankfully, Prince Baelor has planned for that as well. The Kingsguard are sworn not to harm royal blood, which is why his next plan after the joust is to keep them engaged on his own. They will not attack him and will be forced to defend. Sir Lionel doesn't like this strategy. It's not very chivalrous. But then again, Prince Baelor tells everyone that he will let the gods decide if it's chivalrous or not, and so they all get into position. Dunk watches Aerion's steed whine and neigh impatiently, while Thunder, on the other hand, is quiet, calm, and composed underneath him. Why would he not be? Thunder is, of course, an older horse, a veteran of half 100 fights. The horse probably knows more than Duncan about what's expected of him. This is when Pate tries to hand Dunk his lance, only for Aegon to quickly step in and fulfill that duty himself. After all, he still considers himself to be Sir Duncan the Tall's squire. As Duncan steadies himself and gets Thunder into position, the viewing area as well as the small folk are forced out of his vision thanks to the narrow eye slit of his gray helm. All he can see is the muddy field before him and the prince's war lance aimed directly at him. Then, suddenly, the horns blow, and a stab of panic shoots through Dunk's entire body. In an instant, he forgets everything. Everything that Sir Arlen had taught him has somehow pushed itself out of his mind. He even forgets how to spur Thunder into battle. Duncan fears the worst. He fears that he will shame himself, shame all the knights who have joined him, and that he'll end up losing everything. But that's when Thunder comes to the rescue. The big stallion knows what to do, even if his rider does not. Thunder charges into battle, and Duncan slowly but surely begins to remember his training. Duncan tries to focus on all that Sir Arlen had taught him about tourneys, but unfortunately, he forgets what Prince Baelor had told him. This isn't a tourney, and you don't aim for your opponent's shield, you aim for the head or the chest instead. By the time Duncan realizes his mistake, it's already too late. His lance has glanced off Aerion's shield, while the prince's war lance has pierced the shooting star on his. Instantly, Duncan loses his lance as Thunder buckles to the ground. Thankfully, the stallion is tough and battle-trained, and the creature manages to find its footing again when Duncan says, up, Thunder," over and over again. The splintered lance is still lodged in his side. The shield is broken and useless, and Duncan is sure that it has missed his heart thanks to the gods watching over him. Duncan pulls out the piece of lance, screams in agony, and then lets the adrenaline take over his body. He mounts Thunder once again, pulls out his sword, and then begins to survey the battlefield. Sir Humphrey Harding is clinging to his horse for dear life. The man is clearly injured. As for his brother-in-law, he lies dead in a pool of blood with a broken lance protruding from his groin. Prince Baelor, meanwhile, is unhorsing a Kingsguard while another fights Robin Riesling. As for the third, he lies on the ground motionless. Prince Maekar too is on the ground, having been unhorsed, but while Duncan surveys the battlefield, he fails to notice that Aerion is nowhere to be seen, and by the time he hears the drumming of hooves behind him, his fate is sealed. Aerion pushes Duncan off of Thunder, and when he falls into the mud, his eye slit is clogged by the wet dirt. Blinded and barely able to breathe, as soon as Duncan is on his feet again, Aerion strikes and hits him in the face using his Morning Star. The blow knocks the dirt out of his helm, but he's still blinded in one eye, this time by his own blood. Duncan cannot find the strength to get up, and his failure to act upon his training since the battle started is weighing him down as well. Aerion stands over him and begins to gloat, but when Duncan refuses to yield, he raises his Morning Star high into the air and brings it down. Somehow, in this moment, Duncan's body moves of its own accord. He rolls out of the way, tackles Aerion to the ground, and then gets on top of him. Duncan then rips Aerion's shield out of his hands and begins to wail on him. He hits the prince in the head over and over again until he has no fight left in him. As a last resort, Aerion pulls out a hidden dagger and tries to stab Duncan, but he quickly swats it away. Duncan doesn't need his training to avoid a cowardly attack like that. He had picked up those skills in the back alleys of Flea Bottom, and Aerion might be able to best Duncan the Tall, but he won't be besting Dunk of Flea Bottom anytime soon. With the prince on the verge of defeat, a raging Duncan raises his helm and demands Aerion to yield at the top of his voice. Pure rage. He has to hold back pure rage to act knightly, for were it up to Dunk of Flea Bottom, he would have ripped out Aerion's grape-like, bruised, squishy eyes with his bare fingers. Aerion yields under his breath, and this is when Duncan calms down and takes another look at the battlefield. Raymond and Stefan are trading blow after blow. Each has splintered the other's shield. Neither the red nor green apple is recognizable, yet the fury of the animosity between the two brothers drowns out the clang of their swords. One of the Kingsguard is badly wounded while another is downed. The third is carrying the injured away, while Prince Maekar is fighting Sir Lionel and Prince Baelor all by himself. While Duncan is distracted, Aerion tries to reach for his Morning Star again, but Dunk has had enough. He steps on Aerion to stop him and then grabs his foot and drags him all the way to Lord Ashford through the wet mud. When they reach their destination, Aerion's armor is covered in brown, but he doesn't go back on his words. He yields in front of Lord Ashford and then withdraws his accusation. After that, Duncan remembers nothing. How does he not know how he got out of that field? Did someone help him, or did he walk out on his own? He knows that Pate, Raymond, and Egg surround him, but his vision is blurred. He cannot recognize his allies. He only knows who Pate is because he's the one yelling at Duncan for having destroyed his armor in his first battle. When Duncan finally regains some control, the first thing he asks Raymond is if anyone died in the battle. Unfortunately, Humphrey Beesbury was slain by Donal of Duskendale. Sir Harding is gravely wounded as well, but the rest are fine, apart from some heavy bruises. Raymond jokes that he has broken a few ribs himself, but all Duncan can think about is Daeron's dream and how it was proven wrong. None of the dragons fell, which means all is well. With this, his adrenaline begins to wash away, and Duncan begins to feel the pain in his left side. One moment it feels like he's drunk, and the very next he begins to black out because of the pain. Raymond, Egg, and Pate help him lie down, and they begin to discuss how they're going to treat the wounds. The ring from the chainmail is embedded in his body, and if they don't do something soon, Duncan might die. Pate suggests they should get him drunk and pour hot oil in the wound, just like the maesters do. However, this is when Prince Baelor arrives and tells them that they should use hot wine instead. He assures them that he will have his maester attend to Duncan's wounds once he's done with his brother. A dazed and almost unconscious Duncan, in this moment, manages to tell Prince Baelor, "Your Grace, I am your man. Please, your man." But for some reason, Baelor doesn't acknowledge him and instead asks Raymond for some help removing his visor. Pate quickly grabs a stool and jumps in to help the heir to the Iron Throne, but he lets out a deafening shriek as soon as he removes the helm, because it's not just the helm that comes off. Something red also falls out of the helm with a loud thud. Pate doesn't stop panicking, and by the time Baelor touches the back of his head, he's already crumpling to the ground. In an instant, Prince Baelor passes away because half of his skull is missing and lying in the mud beside him. Even in this moment, somehow, Duncan manages to catch Baelor's body, yet his narration tells us that he doesn't remember any of this. People tell him that he keeps screaming the word up over and over again, but Duncan doesn't remember that either. Prince Baelor is bequeathed to the flames, as is Targaryen tradition hours later. Prince Valar stands vigil at the foot of his bier as everyone else offers their condolences. And then, finally, it's Dunk's turn. He offers his sympathies to the prince, who, contrary to Duncan's expectations, manages to contain his anger really well. Maybe that is what the weight of being the heir does to a person, because after Baelor's death, that role has fallen upon him. All Valar says is, "My father was only 39. He had it in him to be a great king, the greatest since Aegon the dragon. Why would the gods take him and leave you? Be gone with you, Sir Duncan, be gone." And Duncan has neither the heart nor the desire to argue with him. He does as he's told and watches from afar as Prince Baelor is embraced by the flames. Prince Baelor saved Duncan twice, once with his sword and once with his words. The world makes no sense to Duncan when a great prince dies so that a Hedge Knight can live. Soon after, Duncan is visited by Prince Maekar and his soldiers at his camp, and he is sure that they're here to kill him, but instead, Maekar is simply here to talk. He tells Duncan that he's banished Aerion to Lys, hoping that a few years of life in the Free City will make Aerion a better man. The two men then discuss how each of them blames themselves for Baelor's death. It was the blow from Maekar's Morning Star that broke his brother's skull, but Baelor would not have been a part of the battle in the first place had it not been for Duncan. They both discuss how they will be shunned by the world in hushed tones. Whenever Valar would fail as a king, small folk would dream of how Baelor could have done better, and then they would always blame the Hedge Knight who killed him. After this heavy conversation, Maekar reveals that he's here to offer Aegon as Duncan's squire. His youngest is quite fond of the new knight, which is why Maekar is hoping that Duncan would pledge himself to his house so that Aegon could squire for him and he could teach his son in Summerhall. However, this is when Duncan tells him that he pledged to Prince Baelor before he passed away, which is why he cannot pledge himself to Maekar's house. He also declines the offer and tells the prince that if his son is to squire for him, he will do so on the road with him, at least for the first few years. Duncan will teach him how to live on the road, how to sleep in inns and manors, and, when needed, under elm trees. An enraged Maekar declares that he will not let this happen, and this is when Duncan steps beyond his line and tells Maekar that if either Daeron or Aerion had slept under trees in open grounds, maybe they would have made better princes and better sons. Maekar doesn't say another word and storms out of Duncan's camp. However, Sir Duncan soon learns that he has earned the prince's approval when Egg shows up at his camp at sunset. Duncan takes in the boy, gives him Chestnut as his horse, and then asks if he would like to go to Dorne. Egg smiles and says, "I hear they have good puppet shows." And with that, we've come to the end of our first volume of The Tales of Dunk and Egg. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and keep an eye out for any shooting stars.